the assignments here, so that'll just take a few minutes. All right, so just taking stock of where we are on the assignment sheet. Today, I'm going to talk more about meter. And on Monday, I'm going to spend some more time yet on meter and rhythmic notation. And then on Wednesday of next week, we will be doing a little bit of review for our first test. Because I believe the first test in this class is a week from today. So it's scheduled for next Friday, just so that you are aware of that. Okay? What you had for me today was you had a handout. I think I call that Rhythm 1 handout. Even though it's not the first rhythm handout, it's the second, but I called the first one 0, so there you have it. And on the front side, I was asking you to determine by the notation whether or not the meter was simple, compound, whether the meter type was duple, triple, or quadruple, and then what the time signature might be for those 4 examples. And then on the back, I just had you kind of identify what note value gets the beat, and draw some arrows to the beginnings or to the start of each of the beats in those examples. And then in the last section, I wanted you to see if you could determine, just by how the song sounds, if you could determine whether or not it was simple versus compound, duple, triple, or quadruple, and a possible meter signature for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me open the floor for questions on this. My plan is to, I won't be collecting this today, but I'm giving you an in-class quiz which is actually copied directly from your homework. Okay? So I don't know if I've done one of those kinds of quizzes in this class yet. Maybe not yet. Okay, so I don't know. I kind of think that's a good thing. But anyways, let's go for questions. Does anyone have anything either on the front or the back that they were confused about or they were concerned about? Yes.
On the back, the fourth one down.
In section 2 then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what we need to do is we need to identify, because we're given the time signature, we need to identify what the duration of a beat is. And then we also need to draw arrows to point to the beginnings of all the beats in these measures. Okay? So 12/16 is the meter signature that's given to us. Now recall that when you have a 12 as the top number of a time signature, that means it's a compound time signature. And that means it's giving us information about the divisions of the beat in the measure, not the beat itself. Okay? So what this is telling us is that there are 12/16 notes that fit into a measure, which is true, but the 16th note is the division, okay? Not the beat. But since we know that it's a compound time signature, we know that there are 3 divisions per beat, okay? And if the 16th note is the division, well, 3 16th notes add up to 1 what? Dotted 8, that's right, okay? So that means your beat value, or the duration of a whole beat for that example, is going to be the dotted 8th. The dotted 8th. And we know from compound time signatures that if we divide the top number by 3, we should get the number of beats in a measure. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. That means we're dealing with compound quadruple. There should be 4 dotted 8th notes worth of time per measure. And so for every dotted 8th note, or every 3 16ths, then I would draw an arrow to show the beginning of that particular beat in that measure. Does that help? Okay. Okay, so that one, the beat value is the dotted 8th. Yes. Other questions? Yes.
The third one on the front.
The third one on the front. Just remind me, is that the one in B major?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at, I already used the staff over here. Maybe I can use a little bit of this if it will come up in a few minutes. I think one of the best measures to, I would probably not look at the last measure. That's probably the most confusing. But any one of the first 3 measures might be helpful for you. For instance, if you look at the third measure, how many groups of notes are beamed together? How many groups of notes are connected by a beat? 2. That's right. And so recall the very important rule that all notes, any notes that are connected by a beam, belong to one and the same beat. So since there are 2 groups of notes connected by a beam, that must mean there must be 2 beats in this passage. So that automatically makes it duple. Okay, duple. Now, probably the, second measure or even third measure. The third measure has quite a bit of 16th notes in it. And 16th notes, for what we're dealing with now, those are further subdivisions of the beat. They don't really help us or tell us much of anything, okay? The divisions of the beat are going to be the 8th notes. So how many 8th notes would fit into one beat? And if you look at the first half of measure 2, that should give that away pretty well. 3, right? There's 3 divisions in one beat. 3 8th notes. They're all the same duration. Remember, all divisions and all divisions have to be the same duration, just like all beats have to be whatever their duration is, has to be the same as well. Okay, so if there's 3 8th notes to a beat, that means we're in compound beat type. So we're dealing with compound duple. I don't have this on the board like I did last time, but who can remember what the typical time signature is for compound duple?
6/8.
6/8, that's right. That's what I would have for that one. All the other the super fast, the 16th notes, they're just further divisions of the division. Okay. But if you think about it, for instance, I can see there's one beat towards the end there that has 6 16th notes beat together. Wouldn't that be the same time duration as 3 8ths or 3 divisions? Because every 2 16th notes, if you treat it or think of it as an 8th, that would help you find the regular division of the beat then. So I would say compound duple. And by the way, right now we're just dealing with either the quarter note as the beat or the dotted quarter note as the beat for the majority of these examples. So yeah, compound triple would be 9/8, compound quadruple would be 12/8, things like that. Okay, so there's that one. Let me keep an eye on the time here. I got time for maybe one more question if someone has one. No, we good? Okay. So, this is what I want you to do. I want you to keep your homework assignment out and a pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a half-sheet quiz that only asks for some of the answers from the homework. Just pay close attention to what I'm asking for. You don't have to recopy the whole homework assignment. It's just for some of the answers. And then just copy what you have on your homework right into the blanks here. And because it's a copy your quiz kind of thing, I think we'll only take about 5 minutes for this one. Okay. take about one more minute on this one. That ought to do it. I'll turn around and pick them up. So, I'm going to ask this question even though I may know the answer, but I don't know for sure. Do you guys prefer copy from home quizzes versus non-copy from home quizzes? Some people are like, I can do it either way, it doesn't matter. All right, I should hopefully have these graded and back to you on Monday. Now, today we are going to, I don't want to say start the last topic before the test, but I'm going to introduce something, a new idea about rhythm and meter, and this will be the last new material that we need to learn before the test a week from today, okay? So what I'm about to talk to you, what I'm going to talk to you today about is really the last new information I know that you need to kind of cram into your mind and into your head. And then we'll let it sit and we'll let it marinate for Monday next week and then also for Wednesday next week. And then hopefully you'll be prepared and ready for the test. Okay, so I am going to talk to you today most precisely now about rhythmic notation. Rhythmic notation. To be a well-rounded musician, music students need to know how to notate rhythms properly. And you might not realize what all goes into notating rhythms properly, but if rhythms are notated in a sloppy manner, without concern for the performer, they can be very difficult to read and to understand. And those of you that are, well, vocalists or instrumentalists, I'm sure that you appreciate the fact that someone, an editor or somebody, has taken the time to make sure that the rhythmic notation has been notated correctly on the music that you read and on the music that you perform. Because otherwise it might be a real devil to try to read and try to understand. But editors and composers and writers and people that notate music, they know these things, and so they take care so that it's the easiest and best possible way for you to read at a glance. Let's read the rhythm. Let me see if I can show you what I mean by the example up on the board. For example, the following measure right here, it is unnecessarily confusing, and I think it's very awkward to count or read. Would you not agree? Because I have a time signature that says 3/4, that says one thing, which I know means 3 beats to a measure. But the way it's notated doesn't seem to match or fit that, does it? It looks to me like how many beats are in this measure the way it's notated? Yeah, it looks like there's 2 beats. So I guess what I'm saying is that the time signature, what we know about what it means, and the notation of the rhythm and the measure, they do not agree. They are in conflict with each other. It doesn't make sense. Don't you think it would be much easier to read if I use beams and dots and ties in such a way that the individual beats were clearly visible rather than hidden? So for instance, what if I rewrote this measure so that I would show all three beats clearly, and the three beats would then match what I'm thinking about, what I'm supposed to be expecting with the time signature. For instance, what if I rewrote this rhythm like so, as follows? This way, this way, this way, and this way. And I have this, and I have this. Now I'm going to put forth to you that the rhythm of this measure that I wrote right here sounds exactly the same as this rhythm. But at the same time, I want you to know and realize that one of the goals that we're going to be learning how to do is, I think that this rhythm is much clearer to read as a musician, whether vocalist or instrumentalist, because this rhythm shows the beats which match the time signature. Would you not agree? Sure, this might be a little bit difficult because there's some syncopation and there's some ties, but when I see 3/4, I want to be able to see at a glance 3 beats. And I can do that very clearly here. I can see beat 1, I can see the beginning of beat 2, and I can see the beginning of beat 3. Whereas in this funky notation, some of the beats, the beginnings and the ends of beats are hidden. They're covered. They're not revealed as clearly as possible. Okay? All right, let's take a look at this one. I've got a measure of rhythm, and my time signature says 3/8. And you might think, well, how many 16th notes would fit into a measure of 3/8? Well, if there's 3/8 notes to a measure, that means 6 16th notes would fill the bar, right? Well, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But is that right? Is that correct rhythmic notation? No, it's not, because the time signature, when I look at that, I want to see 3 beats clearly, quickly, at a glance. And I don't. The way it's written, the way it's notated, I see 2 beats. And it doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense to my mind. So, would it not be clearer to rewrite this measure, even though the rhythm sounds exactly the same, would it not be clearer to actually write it this way? Is that a little easier to read in 3/8? Oh yeah. I'm like, thank heavens. You know, to try to read this with this meter signature, it's whack. But does not this measure sound exactly the same as this measure, rhythmically speaking? So what have I done really? What is the goal? What do we need to try to do if we're given incorrect rhythmic notation? That is, if we have rhythmic notation that doesn't match the time signature, what is our goal? How do we clarify or clean up the rhythm so that it's clearer for the performer to read and so that it does match the time signature? What are some of the things we need to do? Well, some of the main things we need to do is we need to make sure, in whatever way we can, without changing the rhythm sound, we need to make the beginnings and the endings of the beats clear. I think these beats down here are clearer because I have properly shown where the beginnings and the endings of each beat are. You see, I can clearly see that this is beat 1, this is beat 2, and this is beat 3. I have separation between the beats, whereas I didn't have proper separation between the beats here. I have beat 1 is actually beamed incorrectly. It should really be broken there. And this is beamed incorrectly, and these should really be beamed in the middle together. So, I just want to stress that in order to clarify or clean up poor rhythmic notation, one of the main things we're going to do is strive to show where the beginnings and the endings of each of the beats in the measure are. And how do we know how many beats and all that stuff in the measure? We're going to know that from the time signature. We're going to know that from the time signature. Okay. I have a in-class handout for you. That'll hopefully give us some information and a step-by-step process of how we can clean up poorly notated rhythms. On the top of this handout are a few tables or boxes. Those we don't necessarily need to spend time on and address here. Those are basically just review of simple beat type and compound beat type and their time signatures. So what I really want to do is I want to start kind of midway through the first page. Let me turn this back on. I don't know if that one's still on here? What are some ways or strategies we can think of or we can devise and use in order to show and purposely clear up and reveal the beginnings and the endings of the beats according to what the meter signature will dictate? What are some of the ways? Well, there are 3 ways we can do this. Number 1 starts right in the middle of your handout. Number 1 means sometimes if we have a poorly or incorrectly notated rhythm, sometimes we have to group notes together the correct way. Okay? And let's see where are my notes here. So the first proper rule of rhythmic notation, I would say, is that beams connect durations shorter than a quarter note when the durations occur within the same beat. It's kind of another way of saying, before I said all notes that are beamed together must belong to one and the same beat. Now it's kind of saying it just in a different way. When you have durations shorter than a quarter note, like 8ths and 16ths and so forth, when they occur properly on the same beat, they must be beamed together. Otherwise it's not clear. Beams are very helpful to show beginnings and endings of beats. And if I were to point this out right here, you see how there are 6/8 notes in this measure, in a measure of 6/8, but there's no groupings, so we can't really tell or see at a glance where the beats are. It just looks like 6 independent, kind of haphazard or random 8th notes. But if I group them up properly, that is, we know 6/8 is compound duple, right? Duple means we have 2 beats in a measure. So if we group notes that occur within the same beat together using beams, that is, you see over here how the first 3 is grouped together, and the second 3/8 notes are beamed together. That clearly shows the 2 beats. And also notice that at the same time there is not a beam connecting notes of different beats. If I had a beam that actually connected these notes right here, that would just be as confusing as what we started with probably. So, grouping notes together. Okay? Read that. What you do is identify the meter, and then group any notes shorter than a quarter. Group them together if they're on the same beat by using beams. So group all of B1 together with beams, group all of B2 or all of B3, whatever you have, but there should not be beams connecting notes on different beats. That's a primary, very paramount rule to clarify rhythmic notation. All right, the second rule of proper rhythmic notation is that beginnings of beats can only be made visible by the presence of a note or a rest squarely on that beat. You can only tell when you read music, if you think about it, you can only tell where the beginning of a beat is if there is a note or a rest right at the beginning of that beat, squarely on the beat. Otherwise, the start of the beginning of the beat is covered or hidden. So, let's look at this divide one. And by the way, out of these three things on this sheet, grouping to me is really not that hard to get my head around. And simplifying on the back is really not that hard for me to get my head around. I find that number 2 here, divide, sometimes when you have to divide notes up, or chop them up, I find that the students get tripped up most by this one, because it's harder to see. Harder to see. Anyways, let's take a look at this. You see, here's a measure in 6/8. Half note and quarter. That doesn't reveal the 2 beats of equal length clearly. It doesn't do that. Because we know in 6/8, what is the length, or what's the duration of one beat? Does anyone know? Dotted quarter in 6/8. That's your beat length. So what we want to do is we want to make the rhythm conform to or show blocks or chunks of dotted quarters. That's it. So we can show where the beats begin and end in those exact units, because that's what the meter signature is telling us. Okay? So we have a problem here. For instance, do you see how that half note? That is longer slightly than the length of our beat, the length of a dotted quarter. So it's actually taking up more than the beat, and so because it's longer than the beat, I can't see properly where the beginning of the second beat is. Because the first beat's too long and it's hiding it, it's covering it up. Okay? So what you have to do when you have note values that are longer than the length of the beat, you have to chop them up. It's a lot like division. In the equation 4 divided by 3, the result is that 3 goes into 4 once with a remainder of 1. So let's think about this. How many eighth notes are there in a correct beat of 6/8? In a dotted quarter? 3, right? But how many eighth notes take up the same time span as a half note? 4. So what I need to do is I need to take 1/8 note out of the half note and pull it away so it's visible, and then stick it on the other beat. Stick it on beat 2. So then I can see a separation or a seam between the end of beat 1 and the beginning of beat 2. So again, I need 3/8 notes worth for beat 1, but I've got 4, so I need to take the 4th one off of there, and I need to move it over to beat 2. So what we need to use is we need to take a dotted quarter out of the half note. A dotted quarter taken out of the half note leaves an eighth. Does that make sense to you? We're going to take the dotted quarter out of the half note, and that's going to be beat 1. Then we're going to put the leftover eighth on beat 2. Now, what I need to do is I need to tie these notes together, because this rhythm here would not sound identical to this one unless I use a tie. So, again, because I don't see the division between beat 1 and beat 2, take what you need, the length of an actual beat, take it out of that little note that's too long, put it there, and then whatever your remainder is, put it on the next beat, and then you'll have to tie those together in order to make it sound like that super long note on the left. But this allows me to see beat 1 is this much, and beat 2 is the eighth plus the quarter. I can see the end of beat 1 and the beginning of beat 2. Questions about that? Yeah, not until we actually have to try. Okay. All right, then let me just finish up on the back side. There's one more thing that we have to do sometimes to get rhythms notated correctly, and that is just to simplify. Where it says here, where you can group smaller values together, do so. Here are some qualifying situations. So, I don't know if these are evident to you. Some of these make a lot of sense to me. You see how over here, that those 2/16 that are tied together, they're all fitting within one and the same beat. You don't have to write 2/16 notes tied together, just write it as those as an eighth note. Does that make sense? So in other words, simplify is, get rid of, sometimes you have too many notes and too many ties and you don't need all that. You can make it simpler, clarify it. Here's another example here. I'm in a measure of 2/4 and I can see the two beats clearly, but isn't it just as easy for a musician to read a half note in a measure of 2/4 than it is 2/4 notes tied together? Again, 2/4 notes tied together, that's just kind of redundant, it's superfluous. We don't necessarily need it, because it's just as clear to show a half note to fill the whole measure. Use one note duration. Now the one on the right, I tend to, I'm almost tempted to say, just forget about that one. Because, I understand what it's trying to show you and you can do that, but I think the one on the very top right here, I think that one is ultra clear as it is. And yes, it can be simplified to this, but I would accept this for full credit. I would.
That one's easier for me to read personally.
Which one, the top one? Yeah? Yeah, and so I'm okay, if you want to just maybe put an X through special situations, you don't have to worry about that. It's mostly these two over here on the left that you're going to be simplifying. Because again, I would accept that top example under special situations. I'd accept that for full credit if you wrote a rhythm that way in that meter. I would. Because we're taking care to show the beginnings and the ends of the beats and things like that. Okay, now, whoops. Okay, now, what I want us to do is, right underneath where this is on your handout, we're not going to be able to get through all these, but I want to try our hand at one of these. Look at that first rhythm there. It's 3 measures worth in 6/8. Can you see the first measure? Does that even reveal remotely or closely 2 beats of compound duple? That's what 6/8 is. Okay, so what we're going to have to do to fix, we're going to have to do some of these things to fix the rhythm. We're going to either have to group things differently, count notes up if we need to, or simplify things. All right, and I'm going to see if I can rewrite that up on the board here rather than on the paper. So. All right, let's just use this here. Okay, 6/8. Let's just look at measure 1 first. That's enough. Let's just tackle that much. I know that 6/8 is compound duple, which means I need to show that there are 2 clear beats in measure 1 rather than the 3 that it looks like there are. Okay. Well, how long? We have to know how long is a full beat in 6/8. This you gotta get used to.
And a dotted quarter.
A dotted quarter. That's the length of the beat always in 6/8. So we need to make and shape and conform our rhythm to show intervals or chunks of dotted quarters. Well, I've got a quarter to begin with, but that doesn't quite fill the first beat, right? It's a little bit too short to fill a dotted quarter's worth of beat. So where am I going to get the remaining part? I need another 8th note to attach to this to fill in beat 1. Where am I going to get that from?
The second quarter note,
Yeah, what am I going to do to the middle quarter note in that example?
divided into 2/8.
That's right. That's right. Split it up into 2/8. Why? Because I need one of those 8s for beat 1, and the other 8 is going to go on beat 2. And now I can see a separation between beat 1 and beat 2. And the only thing I have to do now to make this measure, which looks a lot better by the way, make it sound just like that measure, is do what?
Put a tie between the 2 statements.
You see how this measure sounds exactly like that measure, but it's less confusing to read because I can see beat 1 and I can see beat 2, each of which are in chunks or units of a dotted quarter. See, to me, that first measure up there is just totally bizarre. 6/8 meter, and you want me to what? You want me to count that? You must have me confused with the amazing syncopation rhythm reader musician or something like that. Yeah. I would never ask you to read something like that. Okay, so this is the way I would change rhythm, measure one. Renotate it, but it has to still sound exactly the same. Okay. What about measure two? Well, this one's not too bad. How many eighths fit into one full beat?
3.
6, 8, 3. Okay? So it looks like I have 2. Okay? And then I have a rest. Can I beam a rest to notes? No. But what can I do with those first 2 eighths? Yeah, because they belong all on beat 1, so I can at least beam them together rather than have them look haphazard and randomly separated. Well, the rest of this measure is pretty easy. What do I do with the last 3? Just beam them together. Because that's the exact size or length of B2. It fits just perfectly. And to me, this measure is much easier to read in 6/8 than that middle measure. Okay. So here we did, what was the actual task or step that we did from your handout? Does anyone know?
We split.
Yeah, we split. So we did some dividing. We chopped it up. What did we do here, according to the handout? Is it grouping or simplifying? Grouping. And guess what we're going to have to do in the last measure to clean that up? Simplify. So what is a quarter tied to an eighth equivalent?
$1.25.
Yeah, and that's the exact length of our beat. How could it be any clearer than if you use the exact length of the beat? Okay, so that's beat 1, and it sounds just like that. What do I do with those rests? Can I simplify the rests?
Is there a dotted eighth rest, right? Or a dotted quarter rest?
Yes. Dotted quarter rest. Yeah, exactly. So all I need to do is this. And now I've really, really improved the notation, the rhythmic notation of that poor example on the top there. Yes?
Where exactly does the dot normally go in the rest? Does it always go in a straight or?
You know what? I would just put it in any space you want next to the quarter rest. I think I put mine in the, I don't have an example there. I put mine towards the bottom, but remember, it has to go into space,
Okay.
the dot, yeah. But as long as I can see it, you're good. Okay, I think we have time to maybe do one more of these. Let's do the next one in 9/8. That is purposely notated wrong or incorrectly. Now think about you know the meter signature is always right. Think about what that means. Be careful about this. How many beats are in one measure of 9/8? 3, right? We divide the top. I'm not asking about divisions. So with this compound time signature, I have to divide the top number by 3. There are 3 beats in a measure. And what is the length of one beat? And don't say eighth note.
Dotted quarter.
Dotted quarter, because there's 3 eighth notes or 3 divisions for every beat. Make sense? See, there's a reason why we focused on this time signature and all this stuff beforehand. Okay, so I want to conform or shape my rhythm of these 2 measures in chunks, 3 chunks of dotted eighths each, if I can get them to fit that way. That's my goal. So let's look at the first measure. Do I have to do anything to that first dotted quarter?
No.
No, because it's perfect, just the way it is. Just like you guys, right? You're perfect, just the way you are. So don't even mess with it. You know, sometimes I have students that, unfortunately, if they're confused, sometimes they change something that doesn't need to be changed, and then it makes it even much more confusing than it needs to be. Okay, so B1 fits our bill exactly. Now what am I going to do? I've got 4 eighth notes, and how many do I need to fill B2?
You need 3 of them, so
Okay.
you're gonna do 2 more dotted quarter rests. Because you have 3.
Yeah, okay, so I need 3 eighth notes, right? In fact, all 4 of those eighth notes, they're beamed together, they do not belong all to the same beat, do they? But just the first 3 do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first 3, and then I'm going to keep them beamed together, but what am I going to do with the last eighth note?
Just don't attach it, but tie it instead.
Yeah, I'm not going to beam it, it's going to go on beat 3. So it's gonna have to look like this. I'm gonna have to separately flag it.
Yeah.
Do you see how a quarter plus an eighth equals a dotted quarter, which is my beat duration? And this is equal to the dotted quarter, and this is equal, so I see one B1, B2, and B3. Do I have to tie anything in this one? No, because I think this sounds exactly like that measure. So what I did here was I did a kind of strange kind of grouping, right? I took 3 of the eighth notes which filled the beat, kept them being together, and I put that extra one on the next beat. And since there's no other eighth note that it belongs to on that same beat, I have to separately flag it. I have to separately flag it. All right, let's take a look at the last measure. How many eighth notes do I need to fill my perfect beat in this meter? 3. Well, let's take the first 3 and beam them together. Because remember, any eighth notes or smaller, any notes that belong on the same beat, if they take a beam, they can be beamed together. So I've taken care of the first 3. What do I have left over there now? Looks like I've got an eighth note. Well, let me point it right here. I've got an eighth note here, this fourth one kind of dangling. I've got another eighth note. Oh, and I've got a quarter note. You know what to do?
I take the 2 eighth notes that you have left and then beam them with another eighth note that you steal from the quarter note.
There you go, that's exactly right, yeah. So we had an eighth note dangling left, the fourth one, and then there's one that's just flagged separately by itself. We're going to beam those together. But I need to get one more eighth to fill B2. So Becca is saying, let's steal one or take one from that quarter note. Let's chop that quarter note up, divide it into 2 eighths. Okay, then 1 eighth is going to go to this beat, and the remaining eighth from that chopped up quarter note is going to have to go to the final beat and be separately flagged. But what do I need to do to make sure that this rhythm sounds exactly like this rhythm?
Tie
Yeah, do you know which ones
the
I
2 eighth, the last eighth in that, yeah.
Yes, those are the exact ones. But I know kind of what I need because I know how long my beat is supposed to be, and I know how many divisions fit in the beat, and I'm forcing and trying to, get everything to conform and fit into those chunks, those sizes. And that's what I did. Here's beat 1, here's beat 2, and here's beat 3. And this to me is much easier to read than that second measure over there, even though they sound the same. So in this case, I had this measure, I had to do a little bit of grouping, but I also had to do a dividing operation, didn't I? I had to split that first quarter note, well, the second to last note. I had to chop that up and divide it so I could get one part for this beat and another part for that beat. And then you tie them together so that it just sounds the same. All right. I think if you can get you are, if you can kind of understand the concept and see how this, we'll have a homework assignment on this, you should have no trouble with anything on the test. Because this just kind of makes you synthesize all your information that you know about meter, and you know about durations and rhythm and all that stuff. Okay, so we're running short on time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the next assignment. This is for Monday. You've got front and you've got back. And I suppose once you get this, you can go ahead and leave.